Hi everyone, Kevin and Dexter here. This is episode 1 of A Beard, a Baby, and 3 Dogs. I'm excited to bring you this episode because we're going to be really focusing on some foundation behaviors that are very important to help you live harmoniously with your new baby and your new dogs, or your dogs I should say. So in this video we're going to be covering sit, down, and stay. We'll be going through a lot of different steps of these behaviors. Yeah, and it's going to be a great refresher if your dog has even done some of this before. So I recommend you start off right where we're starting off, so that way we're all on the same page. So let's dive in and take a look at the first video. Here we go with sit. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate how to teach your dog to sit. We're going to start off by using a food lure. So a food lure is a visible piece of food. So I have it here. I've got my dog V. I've got Rosa and Bill in the background here. I'm going to be rewarding them periodically as well. But I'm going to start off with a piece of food by his nose. I'm going to lift it over his head, and that should get his butt to go down. So you're going to lift it over his head towards his back end. You're going to want to do about 5 of these in a row. So I'm using a piece of food to guide him out of the sit. And then food at his mouth, food over his nose, and the butt should go down. He is very well aware of what I'm doing. Your dog will pick up on this pretty quickly as well. Stay, guys. Food there, over there. Try to get about 5 of these in a row. I'm just kind of doing the same exact motion. Food there, over his head. Good boy. I think this is number 5 here, so I'm going to do one more, and over. Good. So, good job. So now what I'm going to do is move to the next step. Stay. I'm going to move to the next step, which is using a hand signal now. You're not going to want to delay yourself like I am there. I just took a second to reward the other dogs. But, so you're going to go right from your food lure. So I'm going to do one more just to show you guys. Right from the food lure over his head, reward him. Now I'm going to get out of position, and I'm going to do an open hand above his head that looks very similar to that food lure. Good boy. I'm going to reward him for that. Once again, I'm just doing all these motions to get him out of position, bring him back to where I was at. Hand signal above his head, and reward. Hey guys. Looks, very similar to that food lure. So all this extra motion is just getting him out of position. Good boy. And reward. I'm going to do about 5 of these. I do believe this was my 5th one. It may have been my 4th. Now I'm going to move to the next step, which is a smaller hand signal. So the smaller hand signal looks very, very similar, just a smaller version of it. And this is the step right before we add in the verbal cue. So I'm going to get him out of position. I'm just going to bring him back to where we're at. Just going to barely do a hand signal. So guys, just barely, just a small hand signal. But the previous one was much larger. This one is just like that. Good boy. Stay, Rose. Hand signal like that. So that small hand signal is how we're going to get him that. Come, Rose. We get her back on her bed. So we're going to do about 5 of these. Everyone. Small hand signal. And reward. Get him out of position. What does it say? Small hand signal. And reward. So that's the last step before we start to add in the verbal cue. So now what I'm going to do for the verbal cue is I'm going to say the verbal cue and see if it works. For him it will work. For your dog it probably will work too, because sit is one they usually get pretty easily. The down is where they struggle a little bit more with. So I'm going to get him out of the sit position, and I'm going to ask him verbally to sit. If he doesn't do it, I'm going to give him about a second or two, and then I'm going to follow with that small hand signal. So I'm going to get him out of position, bring him back, sit, and reward. So I asked him to sit verbally, and he did, so I'm going to reward him for doing that. So I'm just going to do a few of these. Stay. Sit. And I can reward that. Now, if he did not sit, if I said sit and it didn't, say I just said the cue and it didn't work, I would just follow with my small hand signal and reward that. So this should go pretty smoothly for you guys. Sit is one that dogs usually get pretty easily. If a dog's going to struggle with this, sometimes it's with the lure portion of it, so step 1. But once you get into it, they catch on pretty quickly. So that is how you teach your dog to sit with a food lure, a hand signal, a smaller hand signal, and a verbal cue. Thanks for watching. And now let's take a look at down. This is what we use most frequently in the house when we're doing things like feeding and changing, things like that. We'll get to how to implement down for that later on, but let's look at the foundation of how to teach this. I'm going to start off with a visible piece of food. I'm going to start at his mouth and bring it straight to the ground. Good boy. I'm going to reward him for that. I'm going to lure him back into the sit. So I have a piece of food there. I'm going to reward him for that. So I'm going to go back down to the ground. Good boy. And then back up. Good boy. So I'm going to do about 5 of these successfully in a row. Good boy. Back up. Good boy. Down. Good boy. Back up. Good boy. I'm going to do one more. I think that's 5. Good boy. Now I'm going to switch this to a large hand signal. So I'll have no food in my hand, but it's going to look very, very similar. Good job, guys. It's going to look very, very similar. So all the way to the ground, I'm going to reward that with a treat from my other hand. Now I'm going to get him back up. I'm going to reward that. Back down with a large hand signal. I'm going to reward that. Up with a hand signal, which I just taught in the previous video. All the way down. Good boy. Good. Stay. And I'm going to do one more large hand signal, then I'm going to decrease my signal to something smaller. So all the way to the ground, good boy. Good. So now I'm going to do a smaller hand signal. My smaller hand signal is going to look very similar. I'm just going to put a little less effort for it. So I'm going to go down to about my knee. No, I did say down. Good. So I'm going to go to about my knee. Good boy. I'm going to reward that. I'm going to get him back into position. Reward that. Get him back into position. Wait him out if this happens. Be patient. I've given the signal. Good boy. Good. Now I'm going to decrease to an even smaller hand signal because these are going so smoothly. These dogs are trained, so in theory it should go very smoothly. If your dog is new to all this, you're going to have to practice these steps a lot. So I'm going to go to an even smaller hand signal now. Good job, guys. Stay. So I'm going to go to about I'm not going to bend at all. I'm going to just stay standing straight with a hand signal just to about my waist. Sit. Good. So it looks just like this. Go. Good boy. So no bending at all. Good job. Stay. No bending at all is my goal there. Good boy. What does it say? Good. Good. So that was about 5 in a row with the small hand signal. Now I'm ready to add in my verbal cue. My verbal cue for this is going to be down, obviously as in lie down. Stay. So I'm going to introduce this just before I give that hand signal. So I'm going to get Bilbo in position. Bilbo, sit. That was an example of how to do it for sit. So I'm going to say down. Good boy. He is going to do this pretty much every time because he's done this a lot. Your dog should not actually go down on the verbal cue. Your dog will just look at you and say, I have no idea what that means. So if I were to say the D word and he doesn't understand it, he's just going to look at me like this. So what I'm going to do to follow is I'm going to give my small hand signal if he does not guess the behavior correctly on the verbal cue. Sit. So I gave the sit cue there. Oh, there he goes. Good boy. I'm going to reward that. Down. Good boy. So basically what's going to end up happening is be very consistent and eventually your dog will go down on the verbal cue. It may take 20 reps in a row before your dog finally goes down on the verbal cue. It might take 50. It will happen eventually as long as you're very consistent about how you do this. If you're inconsistent or if you start to mix your hand signal and verbal cue at the same time, your dog may never truly go down on a verbal cue, and you want to make sure that they do go down on a verbal cue. This is going to come in very handy if you have your hands full. If you have a baby in your hands and you don't have a hand signal available, you need them to respond to your verbal cues. And now let's take a look at stay. This is how we're going to build longer durations for the behaviors of sitting down in order to make it work for changing and feeding and playing with toys. Stay, guys. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to start off with a 1-second food distraction. And I'm going to try to get about 5 of those in successfully. So I'm going to start off with a piece of food right by her mouth, and I'm going to dangle it away for about 1 second. Once again, if she can do about 5 of these successfully, then I know I'm ready for the next step. The next step is the same thing except for 3 seconds. So that was about 5 successful in a row. Now I'm going to dangle for 3 seconds. Good girl. As long as she holds position, she gets it. If she breaks position, I will remove it until it's too bad and get her back into position. Okay? So, stay, guys. So basically, 1, 2, 3, and reward. If she breaks, I'm going to tell her too bad, and I want to restart. These guys have all had some training, so there might not be very many breaks in this video demonstration. So if your dog does break, just tell them too bad, reset them, and start over from where you left off. So 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3. If that's going well and your dog is holding position, then you're ready for the next step. The next step is going to be putting food on the floor for 1 second. So same requirement for her, just stay. And I need you to stay while I put a piece of food on the floor as a distraction. So here we go. Everyone's staying, piece of food here, just for 1 second. I'm going to reward her if she can do that successfully. If she were to break, I would tell her too bad, and I would snatch the treat away, and I would start over. Good girl. I'm going to shoot for about 5 of these in a row. And if she can do about 5 in a row successfully, then I'm going to move to 3 full seconds. Stay. And if she can do about 5 of these in a row successfully, then what I'm going to do is move to 3 full seconds of food on the floor while I stand up straight. Stay, guys. Once again, she's probably not going to break very often because she's done this a lot. Your dog will most likely break. Keep track of how many times your dog breaks. If your dog is breaking a lot, make it a little easier. Go back to the previous step. Usually about 3 fails in a row means go back. So I'm going to do one last one of 3 seconds. Good. Now I'm going to do the next step, which is 3 seconds of the food on the floor while I stand up straight. Go ahead and step on it if your dog does break for it, because it's a lot easier than trying to bend over and pick it up before your dog does. They're a lot faster than we are. Once again, do about 5 of these. If 5 are successful, or 4 out of 5 are successful, you're ready for the next step. If you only get about 3 out of 5 successfully done, then you're going to want to do it again. If there's 3 fails within that set, then you're going to want to go back to the previous step. So now that she's doing well with the food distraction, I'm going to move to a distraction of me walking around her in a circle. I'm going to break this into 3 steps. First step is just going to be me stepping there and back. So 1 step to my right, there and back, there and back. Same rules. If she can do about 5 of these successfully, then I will move to the second step. Good job, guys. Now I'm going to move to 2 steps because those were all successful. Most dogs will succeed with that. If they keep failing with that, you can just go to a little half touch. So I might stay stationary, but my leg might move, and then I would reward that. Most dogs, if they're going to break though, it's going to be when we get around the other end. So I just did 1 step and back. Now I'm going to move to 2 steps. So step, 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 and back. I'm going to reward that. Stay, step, and back. And I'm going to reward that. I'm going to try to get about 5 of these in again. The faster you go, the faster your rate of reinforcement is, or the higher your rate of reinforcement is, and the more likely your dog is to succeed with this. If you go very slow, your dog is probably going to start to fail. I'm going to move to 3 steps now because I just got about 5 successful 2 steps in a row. Once again, going to 3 seconds here, or excuse me, 3 steps here. Reward. And she's doing really well once again because she's had a lot of training with this. Your dog will pick up on this very quickly though, as long as you have well-timed communication with your dog. Yes, you're doing the right thing, or too bad, that's wrong. Once you get about 5 of the 3 steps in, you're ready for the entire walk around, which is our end goal with that. So I'm going to do the whole walk around. Your dog will most likely stay if they've done it as smoothly as she has. If your dog has been struggling with that, it might take a lot more back and forth. Just kind of keep track of what you're doing. If your dog has failed, 3 in a row, go back to the previous step. Or if your dog's doing so-so, stick at that step for a little while. Now, your next step after that is just to do the same thing on the other side of the dog. So I would do 5 steps this way, and then 5 2 steps, 5 3 steps, and walk around. Thanks for watching. Next week we're going to get into more foundation behaviors, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to incorporate these into everyday life in preparation for either your new arrival or the baby that you already have. Until next time.